Welcome to Customer Driven with Chad McDaniel. Well known throughout the customer leadership industry, Chad has been the chief community leader for Execs in the Know, one of the top executive customer advocacy groups on the planet. With a passion for customer success and a desire to share and develop best practices, Chad's conversations with industry leaders aim to give unfiltered, unplugged access to industry peers who are customer obsessed, just like you. If you enjoy the show, please be sure to rate and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Now here's your host, Chad McDaniel.
Well, welcome to all listeners. Hi, this is Chad McDaniel with another episode of Customer Driven with Execs in the Know. And today we're conducting this episode from Seattle. We're just on the start of hosting our intelligent automation briefing, partnering with Microsoft here at their lovely facility. And I have the absolute pleasure, Antony Brydon, who is the CEO of Directly, to come share with me today a little bit about some of the continued evolution of AI and machine learning and what I call next generation technologies that are taking place within the service leadership side, but also help me with some concepts, what we're hearing about fixed to fluid, the gig economy, the ever-changing landscape of a fluid workforce, and just a range of things that I guess we could talk about here today. But Antony, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here, not only in person today with us, but to get a few minutes of your time, and I know how busy you are, so welcome.
Chad, it's good to be here.
So real quick for our listeners, maybe just a quick introduction of yourself and the company, and then let's jump right into the conversation.
I'm Antony Brydon. I'm a co-founder of Directly, and we build a customer service platform that makes it easy for companies to build large global networks of their experts that replace their outsourced call centers and deliver better answers to customers in the moments they need them.
And you're based in San Francisco.
South Park, San Francisco.
South Park,
right
okay.
In the center.
Yeah, beautiful area, by the way, and hope you had a great summer. Antony, by the way, Directly has been a fabulous partner of Execs in the Know and the overall community itself, and kind of what our movement has been about leaders learning from leaders and just sharing insights and best practices. And really for you and your company, you've been doing some very dynamic things over this landscape for a number of years now. But to get your perspective on kind of today, 2018 and moving forward in 2019 and right around the corner 2020, when we think about some of the emerging technology or next generation's technology and the continued shift to automation and how we as service leaders can better get best practices, consumer response and support, there's probably a whole discussion you and I could have around that in itself. So my first question to you would be, as you kind of look at the state of the state right now, where do you see us as service leader industry as it's coming at this forefront of these emerging next generation technologies that are in front of us?
I think there's two important conversations going on right now. They're going on independently, and they need to be brought together. The first important conversation that's going on is the digital workforce and the changing models of work that are affecting customer service. And that's a trend that we're just seeing from kind of captive call centers in the 80s to outsourced call centers in the 90s, to the rise of freelancer model in 2000s, now with the rise of gig models and the like. So that's one trend, and it's getting a lot of attention for folks as they realize the leverage of moving to those more fluid and gig models, essentially applying Uber and Lyft concepts to customer service and call center work. The second conversation that's going on right now is about AI and automation, and looking for the points of leverage that intelligent automation can deliver. And right now, those conversations, they're incredible conversations. They're both happening independently. I'm eager to see them come together. The reality is I'm very excited about automation and its potential. We're finding it has a lot of limitations in terms of many companies not having the data or the time and resources to make it work. And, we think these fluid work models, a company's ability to build networks of domain experts that can train the AI, that can create content for the AI, is in fact the secret to making it work. So I'm eager to see these two conversations come together, and the sum is going to be, the whole is going to be more than the sum of the parts.
So we we hear this term about this fixed to fluid, and I know you referenced a little bit in your previous conversations, but this fixed to fluid across the entire spectrum is, not only within the AI tools to support the automation of those workflows,
Yep.
but also around that gig economy component too, and the marriage of those two. I just want to clarify, when you say fixed to fluid, can you give a little bit more description around that?
Sure. The inspiring, kind of metaphor for me was a trip to Patagonia I took many years ago. I saw a glacier called the Gray Glacier, smack dab in the middle of Patagonia, 10,000 years old, and that huge chunk of ice, as I watched it, was calving off small icebergs that were calving off smaller and smaller icebergs that were flowing into the lake. And that became a very kind of inevitable, powerful metaphor for me for what is happening with work. Work used to be these huge, captive, fixed workforces, call centers that were 10, 20, 30,000 agents. It moved to an outsourcing model that was a little more agile. Now we see it moving to a gig and freelance model. So our customers are building these networks of experts that earn, maybe a couple hundred, maybe a couple $1,000s a week for atomically answering these questions, resolving these tasks, and the like. And what we are seeing right now is huge parts of the workforce move from this 20th century model to much more dynamic models. And we're seeing companies employ this really broad mix of outsourcers and freelancers and gig workers and increasingly automating the work. So when I say fixed to fluid, much in the way that the climate is changing and changing really rapidly, the work climate is changing, and changing to kind of much more fluid, much more atomic work.
So this clearly is not a fad. I mean, this is definitely, it's coming. If I'm a service leader listening to this right now, it's a huge opportunity of consideration and evaluation if I'm in the old 20th century model, as you put it. And, as it continues to sort of transform itself or transfix itself to us, if I'm sitting there right now as one of these leaders, what are the things I need to be thinking about? What are some of the questions I should be asking and evaluating? And then kind of the considerations on my go forward.
This, I think the most important consideration is this is not a trend that is coming. This is a trend that is here,
Right.
that is now. That is kind of happening as we speak. It's funny when it comes to work. If I give a sister now, when it comes to climate, folks will say, "Hey, I think that climate is, the climate may be changing in 10 or 20 years, but what are all these fires doing right now? What are all these?" The reality is that, you can look around right now in the work sphere. This is here, this is now, and the advantages of these models are twofold. When you move to a more fluid model, for example, in our networks, domain experts who understand the products, who are compensated only when they resolve a customer question, there are two things that happen concurrently. One, most importantly, you can get a dramatically better customer experience. Response times in terms of seconds instead of minutes instead of hours, and CSAT scores, NPS scores that are markedly higher. You can do that while fundamentally changing the economics. Across all of our networks, these fluid networks typically work at 67% less cost per case. And when the automations apply can be greater than that. And so the really interesting thing is, for the first time, we've got the ability to significantly improve the experience while significantly changing the economics and reducing the cost per case. That is what fluid models do.
Right.
They decouple those things that have historically been coupled, and allow better experience. And for some companies, it's lower cost, but for other companies, it's the opportunity and the economics to engage much more broadly and much more deeply with the customers.
So again, you're listening to Antony Brydon from CEO of Directly, and we're here podcasting from the Seattle event as we're getting ready to host the Execs in the Know AI briefing, and we've got a great room of people here today, and I'm looking forward to the interaction we're going to be having. Earlier this week, Antony, you were in some sort, I guess, a gathering about the gig economy. And it was quite a large event. And I think there was a number of different sort of thought leadership in the room and takeaways and pieces. And that was just a couple of days ago. I think you were there here in Seattle also. Can you tell us a little bit about that particular conversation and some of the thought processes that were taking place in those discussions with the gig economy?
So yeah, that was a very interesting summit, because what folks were doing were specifically looking at the different work models and thinking about all of the areas of the enterprise that they can be applied. A lot of the work that companies do is fluid in nature, and by fluid in nature, I mean the work ebbs and it flows. There's seasonal variation. There's weekly variation. It requires kind of niche skill sets. So when you think of a company, often the customer service, is certainly fluid. Some days you're inundated. Some weekends it's unpredictably light. It's a fluid problem. Marketing and sales are similar. You've got promotions, you've got seasons, you've got new product releases where marketing and sales are overwhelmed, and other times there are dry seasons. So the real thrust of that conference was companies looking at all of the work they have, the work that's fundamentally fluid in nature, and then starting to rethink how they resource and build their own workforces. In most cases, the incoming work that a company has to deal with is fluid, but their own workforce is fixed. A set of, kind of long-term full-time hires, and that doesn't match up and that doesn't marry up particularly well.
As you started out the conversation in regards to that, we cannot look at the emerging technologies and even the work structures that we've been talking about in separation. They're kind of in tandem together. I guess we'll close out on this for the listeners here today. Where do I start? How should I be, again, we could talk predictions and all sorts of things here, but I mean, right now, where should I start looking and considering, and what should I be doing next, do you believe, when it comes to this?
So one, I think we're at the right conference, because I think customer service is the right and often the easiest place to start. And the reason for that is a lot of the work in customer service is atomic. It's single cellular. It's cases. It's tickets. It's customer issues, and it's one of the best places to bring a fluid work model to, or kind of automations to. So I think, one, my guidance is customer service is a really good place to start. It's many of the reasons that we focus on customer service. Two, the guidance would be, it is now easy to test these solutions. Our solutions, you can launch a network in a day, and you can get data in a couple days. Testing is really important, because I have found kind of 10 days of testing more valuable than 10 months of whiteboarding. It is almost impossible to whiteboard this. So that's a second solution. If just light up a test, for a few days, constrain it, and actually look at the real world experience of customers and the real world data that comes in. The third piece of advice I'd say is get out of committee. And by get out of community, I mean as few stakeholders as possible. Yes, fluid work models and AI have potential for the marketing leads and the sales leads, but the larger the committees are around these things, the harder it is actually to get test and get some data in the practice. So that's my guidance. 10 years ago, we would have had to spend 10 months designing a test. You'd have to run 90 days to get any data. Those days are gone. You can launch these things in hours. You can get data in days, and you can make meaningful decisions based on that.
Really, no excuse. I mean, first of all, thank you for the summary of those tips and recommendations. But there really is no excuse to why we can't start in these small pilots and some of these sort of test fields and kind of go from there and learn fast. At the end of the day,
often there is no excuse, but often there are kind of fears and concerns about AI. And about fluid work models. The good news is that the leading vendors, in this space, and I'd include us as one of several leading vendors. We built platforms to kind of address those left field concerns. GDPR and privacy. is really important because most customer service organizations serve customers in Europe. The modern platforms and the leading platforms have been designed specifically, for data privacy, and to be compliant. The modern platforms are designed to be cognizant of employment, and employment regulation and how that works. So, so there can be a lot of comfort, if you pick somebody that is designed thoughtfully, built privacy but designed into the platform to kind of alleviate some of the ambient fears that can prevent a 1-day, 10-day test from getting off the ground.
Well, Antony, thank you so much, and I'm glad that our listeners were able to get some time with you today and really get the frontline perspective and some of the thought leadership that you've been willing to share. You've been very active in the advocacy around this space, and keep doing the great work that you and the company directly have been doing in the industry for what we've been talking about, and Execs Know appreciates that partnership. Again, to all our listeners, you've been listening to Antony Brydon from CEO with Directly. I'm going to ask if you enjoyed today's podcast, please feel free to give feedback. We will have show notes available for you. If not already, please make sure you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and the other channels that are available for you. So on behalf of myself and Antony, we want to welcome or thank all of our listeners for your time today, and keep the charge of customer success going on. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Customer Driven with Chad McDaniel. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to rate and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. It really makes a difference in helping others find the podcast. For more information on our customer experience community, please visit execsintheknow.com.